Again. Our shoulders are not together.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on shoulder
Yeah,
to shoulder.
that's a good idea. Keep your shoulders together. Okay, today is Sunday, December 19th, 2021. Thank you, Mom and Dad, for joining us. Your lives are wonderful, and we love pulling ideas. The kids have enjoyed hearing your stories, and so what I thought we'd do is we'd ask some different questions, and we may get responses from both of you or just one of you. But Dad, last time you talked to us about Skillet, your dog. Will you just tell me again, where did Skillet come from, and how did he end up with 3 legs?
Mm-hmm. Oh, we missed all that?
Yep.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Skillet came to me from some polygamists. We're up in the muddy harvesting timber. And they were, one day they came back from the muddy, and there by our house, right there at the foot of the muddy, they dropped off a dog. And
So that's how you got Skillet.
I don't know how they did it on purpose, or whether it was accidental of him getting out of the vehicle, or what happened. But anyway, he wandered around there for a while, and nobody ever picked him up. And so I got him and took care of him, and that's how I ended up having Skillet. But he was a little dog the polygamists had, and they took him back and forth up in the muddy to get timber for their sawmills out in Short Creek.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the polygamists live.
I want to interrupt you just a second. One time you told me that your mother said, we better feed him.
Oh,
And she's like, well, and then the question was, where do we put his food? And she said, I have an old skillet here. You can have it. Isn't that how you got the name?
that's how he got his name, yeah.
How did Skillet end up with 3 legs?
Okay, I gotta repeat that all again.
Shortened version.
Shortened version, yes.
Okay, Skillet would always go with me. He was a fast little runner dog. He could go as fast as my tractor would go. Of course, back in those days, tractors didn't go too fast. But he would follow me wherever I went. But he went with me to bind grain. And me and a Mexican were binding grain. There had to be somebody on the binder sitting on the seat to, collect about 3 bundles in a little rack. And then he would press the foot and dump the bundles out in the field. So when we come along to shock the grain, which is to stand them up, for them to dry, before you take them to the thresher. Well, this little dog always liked to be right where I was on the tractor. Wherever I was, he would like to be the same place. Well, accidentally, he got on the wrong side out in the grain where I was harvesting the grain with this little, not a combine, but a binder. And all of a sudden, those reels, would go around like this and pull the grain into the binder to cut it off and put it up in a bundle. And he all of a sudden heard a big loud squeak. And I think what happened, he saw that thing coming down. They were going round and round like this. And it scared him, so he backed up. And backed up into the sickle that was cutting the grain off. And I tried to catch him and see what was going on with him. And he took off lickety-split back down to the house, which is about a mile away. I was sleeping in a tent outside in that weeping willow tree back of my house, and I had a little bed out there. And when I got home that afternoon, sometime kind of at noon, I found him. He was sleeping. He was resting under that bed.
He was still alive.
Oh yeah, He somehow, I suppose, he probably licked that leg so it didn't bleed anymore. And so he was still alive. And he would, after a while, after he healed up a little bit, he would go with me again on the tractor, but not quite as fast. And sometimes I would have to put him up with me on the tractor and, in the seat to ride with me. But he was still faithful about wanting to go with me wherever I went. He was with 3 legs.
Still, he forgave you for cutting one of his legs off.
Yeah. Somehow dogs don't carry a grudge.
And how old were you? About 11?
I was about 12, 13, something like that.
Wow.
And I had that dog for a long time. And I remember when I went off to college, that little dog, he was getting pretty old by then. And my mother took care of him. But I come home one weekend I still had to do some farming. Even after I was in college on weekends, I still had to do a few things. And I found him in the flower garden in front of my house. He'd passed away.
Mm.
So that was the last I saw of my little skillet dog was then. So
Well,
that was it.
speaking of more dogs and speaking of books, Mom, I know one of your favorite books to read to all the kids was Where the Red Fern Grows.
No, not at all. I always cried before I could get that book finished.
Well, I know books have been an important part of our lives. Where did this love of books within our family begin?
Well, the first I heard of it was with my grandfather, Delp. My mother said she'd bring a book home from the library. She read a little bit of it and then would leave it out. And if she left it laying where her dad saw it, he'd pick it up and have it read before morning. And then she would have to take it back in, having known he had enjoyed it as well. But she often would read all night as well, and sometimes she would read until all the oil was burned out of her lantern.
Wow. Now, Dad, did your family, were they also into books, or were they more into the farming, or what was their?
My mother was more into taking care of the house. She was a great housekeeper, very good cook, and I don't remember her ever reading very much. You read
Scriptures every morning. She was very faithful in her scripture
and
reading.
she would read the Reef Society magazine. We had, remember, a Reef Society magazine.
Yeah.
I remember she had that, and she would quite often give me that very magazine to read myself.
Oh.
At Relief Society magazine, and it was kind of like reading the Reader's Digest. Little short stories, and it was interesting.
Mom, what are some of the books that you have liked to read to the kids over their lives? What were some of the family books that you liked?
Well, I liked Man of the Family and Little Britches, and those were about kids in the early turn of the 1900s and how their life was so different from ours. Even in the 50s and 60s, there's so many changes had been made, and it was fun to read about how they managed things and how much responsibility young people took, actually.
Anita, I need a fact check on this one. Will you look up the author of Man of the Family, because both of you are telling me it's Moody, but I don't want to disagree with you. But Dad, I know that when I was initiated into the family, one of the books I was given to read was Man of the Family. Why was that book important to the development of a father or a young man coming into your family?
No, it kind of told some responsibilities that a man ought to show to his children, to be responsible, and as a man to take care of those children and be out there taking care of them. As his job as being the provider. Mm-hmm. So it was very specific about how it explained that. I thought it was very, very good doing that.
I used to think, insert any John Wayne, just about any John Wayne movie.
Can you just say, yeah, you're right?
Okay, yeah, you're right. It was Ralph Moody. So, well,
Are you
Okay.
thinking When a Man's a Man?
Yes, that's the one I'm thinking of.
Harold Bell Wright.
Thank you.
We read that one out loud to the kids.
That was the book I was initiated into the family.
Camera went up.
When a Man's a Man, the cowboy
Did it go off
story.
again?
Yeah.
It's still going. It just screen went
okay.
off.
Okay.
Okay. So,
There's another book I'd
Yeah.
like to share with you. It's called The White Indian Boy,
Oh yes.
Mhm.
and it was about
This is a true story, not fiction.
Yeah, it was a true story about a boy that was a farmer's son, and he was responsible for taking the sheep or the cows out to graze, and be responsible so that they didn't run away or anything.
were you the white Indian boy in Orderville?
No. But he was kind of kidnapped by the Indians out there in the plains, the prairies. And they took him to...
Here. Right up here in this
yeah,
part
probably
of Idaho.
was right here in this part of Idaho. They took him to their... what?
Oh wow.
The
Their
village?
Indian reservation, and he kind of liked to be in that place because he wasn't so demanding to have a job. He could be with the Indians, and they treated him generally pretty good. Some of the Indian boys weren't too kind to him, but most of them were, and he became a white Indian boy.
Wow.
And it's a very good story.
If you want to buy it, it's on Amazon for $6.95.
I
Mm.
think we have a copy still.
Mm.
Maybe
Yeah.
not. I don't remember.
Dad, I was going to ask you about another book about dogs, and then Mom, if you could tell us a little bit about Dad's Farmer Brown stories. So, Dad, I know one of the books Anita enjoyed the most as a child was the what's it called?
Diggiest Dog.
Diggiest Dog. Why was that a favorite of the kids?
That's a darn good question. Because I would read it, I suppose, and I kind of liked it myself. And that dog had more adventures of digging and burying and trying to find where he had buried something. And so his history was digging and trying to find where he buried whatever he buried.
And then fixing it all when he did it too much.
Yeah,
Then he covered everything up.
yeah, he covered him up and he tried to go find him again.
Yeah.
Mom
And
and
so-
sorry, Dad, go ahead.
And that was the crux of the story of trying to find where he would bury his treasures. And it was kind of an interesting little dialogue of trying to find his treasures that he buried around the place. And he had a hard time finding where he buried his stuff.
Wow. I know I'd never heard of this before, but Anita refers to Farmer Brown stories, Mom. That Dad used to tell Farmer Brown stories. What can you tell me about what are Farmer Brown stories?
They were stories that he created in his own mind, mostly telling what he had been doing during the day. But we did know a man, his last name was Brown, and he had a farm, and he had all kinds of things. He liked to hatch out quail and pheasants. He had ducks and geese and cows and sheep and everything on this little farm. And so when Roe would go there to help out, then something would happen. And some of the ducks got in the water and swam. And when the kids were really little, they liked to make the noises. And what does the duck say when they're talking to each other and things like that? And I think that was just a really bonding time for Dad and the kids, because he worked so many hours, 7 days a week, and he wasn't around a lot. So when he was around, he tried very hard to make contact with his kids and be more involved in each other's lives. And that's where Farmer Brown's stories started.
So very interactive story time. So he may tell the story, and the kids would help act out the noises, and he at the same time he was sharing what he did for a living.
yes,
Yeah.
With
yes,
them.
yes.
Oh, I love that. Dad, I know you've had many skills over the years. I was surprised to find out that you worked as a movie projectionist as well as a welder.
My gosh, I want to tell you about Farmer Brown.
Oh, okay. Tell us more about Farmer Brown.
Farmer Brown lived between here and Murtaugh. His little farm and little dairy is over there by Simplot, right in that area right there. And so his old barn and stuff is still over there. But old Farmer Brown always had all kinds of crazy animals on his farm. So it was kind of fun to take kids there so they could see all different kinds of animals at the farm.
So it was a real person.
It was Farmer Brown's farm. And so his name was Brown too, so that worked out pretty good. And after he passed away, his son took it over. So we still had a kind of a son Farmer Brown farm. So it's still kind of interesting.
Well, tell me about welding. I know one of the stories I heard was welding, and I understand that lights get very bright when you're welding, and bad things happen if you don't protect your eyes.
Yeah, you have to have, for electric welding, you have a special helmet, to put on your face.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think I forgot to put on the glasses for electric welding, and I just put on the mask for gas welding. And the lights are a lot different from electric welding from gas welding.
Mm-hmm.
And so I made a mistake there. It took me a while so I could see real good again, because it kind of burnt, my eyes
Mm-hmm.
with that electric light. And I had learned how to weld in college, but I didn't learn some safety rules. So that's what happened with burning, a little bit of my eyes. But it took a while before I could finally see again. Okay.
I remember reading the story where your mother, you would complain about your eyes hurting later that day, and she looked at them and saw that they were red, almost like they were sunburned, and how she sat down and put wet cloths on your eyes to help ease the pain.
I don't remember that.
Well,
Good
trust
thing-
me, it was a good story.
Good thing she looked out for me, wasn't it?
Yeah. Let's talk about best friends. And I know that one of the critical things in your lives are relationships. When you think back as a child, did you have best friends? Mom?
I did. I had a couple of really best friends. One lived close, and her name was Linda. So that was kind of fun. She was a couple years younger, but she looked like she was really quite a bit older because she grew up so fast. In fact, one time Dad came home from work and he looked at my mother and said, "What's that 18-year-old girl playing with Linda? She's only 10. Why is that?" But Linda was fully matured and looked, well, I wasn't 10, I was probably 13, but she looked a lot older than I did. And the other one was Barbara. And Barbara was a parish, and our little town of Centerville was made up of parishes and fords, and that was about it. And all of them were LDS except our family and one other family. And they didn't have any kids close to my age. But Barbara is the one that took me to primary when I was 10 and introduced me to primary and helped me make it through and graduate and do all the things required to graduate, which included going to the bishop's home and telling him the 13 Articles of Faith. Which
As
I did.
as a non-member.
As a non-member. And I went, I said, "Oh, I can't remember exactly." And he said, "That's all right. That's all right." And she's also the one that encouraged me to get baptized.
Wasn't Brother Smoot was that your bishop?
No, it wasn't at the time.
Okay.
Brother Smoot became our bishop not long after that, and was our
Yeah.
bishop until we interviewed with him before we were married.
Is this
Stan Smoot.
Stan Smoot.
Stan was the same age as my brother Myron. I went to school with him.
And it sounded like you honored that man by naming one of your children Stan.
I did. We did. We had another good friend in Twin that was Stan, and he had been in the bishopric too. And so both of them were in our mind when we used the name Stanley.
Wow. Barefoot and going to primary. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do. That was quite an interesting experience. first time I ever went to primary was in the summer, and Barbara said, I'll just stop and get you, and then we can walk up to the church. Was only a couple blocks from my house, and we can go to primary. I said, well, what's primary? And she explained that it was just where the kids come and have some good lessons, and we're going to learn how to knit. Oh, I like to learn how to knit, so I went with her, and but I didn't, before I left, always went barefoot all summer long. We had one pair of shoes. It was right after the war, and people didn't have lots of material things, but you got a new pair of shoes when school started, and you wore them through school, and maybe if you grew a lot, you'd get another new pair bound Easter time. But then in the summer, you didn't wear your shoes, and I never went to church, so I didn't need any church shoes, and I couldn't find my shoes. And I had a little dress on that's ready to go, and I still couldn't find my shoes, and my mother said, just go. You're going to be late, you're going to make Barbara late and everything. So I went barefoot to primary. I didn't know they went into the chapel. I had no idea what they were going to do. So I walked in, followed her into the chapel, and I tried to put my legs as far under the bench as I could so nobody could see I didn't have any shoes on. Hold my dress down as low as I could get it, see if it'll cover up my toes. But it was kind of cold in there on my feet. But anyway, not anybody said anything about me being there without shoes. But I was totally embarrassed. I never went to church again without shoes on.
Is this supposed to be on?
Yeah, so it'll.
Oh, yeah,
The
okay.
There you go.
So maybe it was on all the time.
I have Mom and Dad be my audio-visual checks because I've had challenges in the past. Dad, you've had a lot of good friends over your time. Who are some of your best friends, and why were they important to you?
The one guy that I had as a best friend, when I first moved from Orderville to Mount Carmel, was the guy I run over with a tractor.
Okay, you told us about that. You told us about almost killing your friend last time.
Yeah.
Running over him. Why was he important as a friend, or who else did you have as a friend?
Well, he was important as a friend because he was close, very close neighbor, just up the street a little ways. So he was just convenient, convenient too, and he was about my same age. He was 1 year ahead of me in school, and I had a couple of friends. When I started school, we went all the way from Mount Carmel to Orderville to school.
All the way, meaning how far?
About 2 miles on a school bus. And I had a couple of good friends in school that I got acquainted with in grade school, and it was fun to have some extra friends besides just Lawrence. So I got acquainted with some other little kids in the first and second grade. I had 2 teachers. One teacher in the first grade was Mrs. Blackburn, and in the second grade was Mrs. Chamberlain. So that was kind of interesting. And then in the third and fourth grade, you had the same teacher, was Mrs. Young. And she was one of my favorite teachers, Mrs. Young.
Why is that?
She just made you feel, important. And feel like you was maybe the only student in the class, almost.
Wow.
And you had different little things to do. Spelling bees, I remember you had to go to the back of the class and read the story that the spelling words were going to be in. So you read the story in front of the class in a certain length of time. And so you learned how to read and learned how to spell at the same time, and read, not necessarily in front of the class, but you went to the back of the class and read, and if you didn't read in a certain length of time, you practiced until you could. And then in the fifth and sixth grade, I had a teacher by the name of Mr. Rust, who was a man teacher, and I'd never had a man teacher before. So it took a little bit of trying to get used to as having a man teacher. But we managed.
How about, I know...
Wait.
Yeah, go ahead.
Who of you can sit there and spout off your elementary school teachers from memory? I can't.
I can.
Oh, you cannot. I am very
Bradley
impressed
Bradley.
that you can remember them so well.
Yeah, especially Mrs. Young, because she was so, so kind and personable to try to teach you. And just, you loved her because she felt like you was the only one in the class.
You have
almost.
a great memory.
He does.
You are incredible, Dad.
Let's go to college, and talk about best friends in college. In reading your life histories, it sounded like when you went to school, you had a new set of friends, and you began to understand who your best friends were and who your best friends were not. You learned a lot of different things. Tell us about some of your best friends in college, Mom.
Well, I was going to go to southern Utah, to where I knew nobody at all in the college. It was called the branch of Utah State, and it was in Cedar City. And Joyce was going to go with me. She was a close friend in school, in high school. And then she changed her mind at the last minute, so I went down by myself. So I just made new friends to start with. And Mary Ann was one, and the girls that I roomed with became best friends. But then Joyce decided to come the second semester, and we'd had 2 semesters in those days. So I moved out and moved in an apartment that had room for another girl, and so she and I roomed and went to school there together for that second semester. Then the next year I decided, I worked all summer in Salt Lake, and then I decided to go to Utah State, which all my credits would transfer, and I wouldn't be so far from home. I got so homesick that first year. I was just barely 18, and I was really homesick. And so Roe came up there too, and so he became my best friend.
Is this on now? I don't see anything moving. Oh,
It'll just go blank.
oh, okay, but it is recording.
It's recording.
Oh, okay. I can see I moved, but I don't move.
I'll trade you sides. I'll come
No.
to an interview if you want to come back here.
No,
to
I
do that.
don't want to. I just wondered if it was gone off again.
No, that's good. Dad, in reading your life history, you made a comment that in college you learned who your best friends were, and I was curious to understand why you made that comment.
Well, I guess because when you leave high school in that little town of Orderville, that was your social life with your best friends. And when you went to college, you had a lot to choose from, a lot of things to choose from. But I lived in a dorm with, 4 people in it, and you cooked your own food in it. And I had a gentleman that lived with me. I think it was Webster. Did he live with us? I had an old gentleman who was handicapped, and he was probably in his 50s or so. Oh man, he was a good cook. And he lived in one side of the apartment with me, and he became a very good friend.
He was a student?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Why did he go back to school so late? I've forgotten.
When he went back to school because he couldn't get a job of a handicap he had from some accident he had with his whatever he was doing. I think he worked at a sawmill or something.
And he became an accountant, right?
So yeah,
Best job.
he had to go back to school to get a degree of some kind to get a better job. And then I had some other good friends. He didn't live with me, but he became a very good friend. Was Max Snow.
Mm-hmm.
Did he ever? He didn't live with me, did he? I don't remember.
I don't know.
Well, let's say he did. Max Snow lived over in
It doesn't matter.
Emery County.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I think he lived in Emery County, and he became a very good friend, Max Snow, because he was in some of the classes I was in at the college, and so I became pretty good friends with him.
And wasn't he the one was your best man at your wedding?
He was.
I remember.
And he also went home with me a couple of times, back over to Orderville, just on weekends, just for a variety.
And then the guy from Canada.
Yeah, I forgot him, Ray Woodward. he was one of my very best friends, and he lived with me in a dorm. And he was from Cordston, Canada. And of course, he could never go home. But he liked to go with me back to Orderville because he could do some things he loved to do on the farm or ranch back to Orderville. So he became probably my best friend.
Actually,
Ray-
you took
Ray
him home,
Woodward.
didn't you, after school?
Yeah, I took him home, and then
You
I
drove him to Canada?
yeah,
Wow.
and then I went to pick him up.
Hmm.
And that was in the days when you could cross the border fairly easily
Wow.
to Canada. But Ray Woodward became one of my very, very good friends. And while he was with me as a friend in Orderville, he became acquainted with a girl in the high school in Orderville, Verdon Chamberlain. Some funny answers, I can remember her name. But he got so he liked her a heck of a lot. But when he went on a mission, finally he got old enough to be called on a mission. When he came home, Verdon had married someone else. So
Let that be a lesson to most of you.
it broke his heart to have that happen to him because he thought a lot of her.
Now, Dad, you didn't serve a mission. Why was that?
Well, probably because none of my friends did, I think is the biggest reason.
Mm-hmm.
None of my friends went, and Max, my younger brother, went mainly because of that. His friends did go on a mission. So he liked to, somehow you like to do something to please your mother and something to, that your friends do.
And in those days, it kind of was what your peers did more than it was everybody needs to go kind of.
Yeah, there was no big push on people.
Yeah. Mom, tell us about how you and Dad met, and then when in that relationship did you feel it was magical? It was something extra special.
I made a. Okay, back up a
Just a
little bit.
minute, is this still on okay?
It's still on.
Okay, I just can't see nothing.
It's
got-
still on, and we've got about 10 minutes.
Okay.
Actually, you have about 20.
Well, you need
We're-
to give Grandpa time to get changed. So
Yeah.
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah. Okay. How did we meet? What was your cousin's name? Think of her name.
Oh, Lorna Sorensen.
Lorna Sorensen. Lorna Sorensen and I were friends and went to Mutual together because this little college was mostly LDS people and they had Mutual still.
Let me tell who Lorna Sorensen was.
Okay.
Lorna Sorensen come from Elko, Nevada. And she was the daughter of my dad's brother, Vaughn Sorensen. Maybe you know that already. But that's where she came from. And so she
She
knew
was a
me.
cousin.
She knew me just because I was a cousin. Okay.
So one night after Mutual, Lorna said, Linda, and Daphne was with us. Will you guys go with me? I've got to drive down and see my cousin Roe. And so we said, sure, we'll go with you. So we jumped in the car. And she drove us down to Roe's place, and her sister, he wasn't home. Yes, he was home. Back up. We went down to the dorm, the boys' dorm, to find Roe so he could drive her to see her sister. That's the way it was. At any rate, we went into the boys' dorm, and there was Roe sitting there at the table with some of his roommates and eating this good food that his old roommate made for him. They were eating pretty darn good. It smelled great. And he said, sure, I'll take you down. And he had a brand new, beautiful car. Oh, it was a beautiful turquoise car with long stripes on it and made out of what?
55 Ford Fairlane.
V8, I remember that. And
Yeah.
what's that, those long stripes on it called? It had wings on the back of it. It was a fancy car. It was really nice. And so we got in there, and Daphne got in first so she could sit next to Roe. She
Oh,
just couldn't. I
didn't
thought,
know.
why did she do that? I wanted to sit by that boy. Anyway, off we went, and Lorna jumped in the back and gave directions to him so we could go down to her sister's. And that's where we met, was at the Boys' Dorm.
Now, Dad, when did you realize that Linda was a little bit extra special? How did she stand out?
Well, probably. I can continue.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought.
I was
She was
looking
giving
for a
you-
picture of your car.
Oh, good.
Yeah, we're gonna see if we can find a picture of the card
I
to show you.
forgot what you called it.
55
Chrome.
Ford Fairlane, blue,
55
Turquoise.
turquoise.
And it had
And
Why was Linda
oh,
extra special? How did she stand
one
out?
one time I want to take her on a date, and one of my cousins was working over to Cedar City, and he had some horses, and he wanted to know if I maybe like to ride some horses sometime, whenever I'd like to go to do something a little different. I said, yeah, I would like to. So I invited Linda to go with me to ride horses. One time was at Des Moines Sorensen, and take these horses and go ride. She knew more about horses than I did, for God's sake. I found out that she knew, Linda knew about, what? Just country life, and didn't bother her whether she went on a date on a horse, or go to a movie, or go bowling, or play ping pong. She just looked like she was, very comfortable in whatever we did, and it made you feel good that she wasn't very picky. She just liked doing whatever we did, and I kind of liked that. I really did.
She was real.
Yeah, she was.
So I'm going to show this to the camera, but the 55 Ford Fairlane.
Yep, that's it.
So this is what a 55 Ford Fairlane looks like. I hope you all can see that on that. All right, so when did you decide to take it to the next level, to get married, Mom?
Well, I was in my room one evening after I'd known him for over a year, and we had dated quite steadily, which is hard to do when you live the length of Utah apart. But when we were in school, we were good friends, and the thought just came in my mind in January, you're going to marry Roe. And I thought, wow, well, I think you're right. My brain, I think you thought it right. I don't know if it was the spirit telling me or just my wishful thinking. And I started dreaming about that and thinking about marrying him. In May, he got the message.
Took him a little longer.
Took him a little longer. But we waited until after harvest was over because he was farming for his dad. Had to finish with the farming. And so we chose the 6th of October with no thinking about it. Was conference time. And it was a wild, busy time, but we were married in October.
What do you remember about your wedding ring and sharing that with your parents?
Well, he came up to visit, and he had the ring in his pocket, and we had to watch the end of Perry Mason because it was Mom and I, we really enjoyed trying to figure out how to solve the mystery before you got to the end of the movie. And so when we were done, Rose said, we're going to take a little drive. And so we went to take a little drive, and when we came back, parked in front of the house and said, there's something in the glove box for you. So I opened the glove box, and there was a little ring box with some rings in it. And I said, oh, what does this mean? He said, well, what do you think? And I said, I don't want you to tell me. So he professed his love and proposed marriage, and that was, and so I was pretty excited. So because he lived so far away, we had a boys' room in our house, and my grandfather was living in my old room, and I had a little cabin behind the house where my brother and his family had lived for a few years. And so I said goodnight to him, and then I went in to my parents' bedroom and woke him up, and I said, Mom, Roe and I are engaged. And she said, oh, good, that's nice. And she went back to sleep. My dad came out in the living room a little bit later and said, oh, Linda, I'm really happy. He said, seems like a really nice guy. And I said, he truly is. So we talked and visited Dad and I for a while, and then I went up to my little cabin nest and slept good.
Anything you want to add to that, Dad?
No, it was quite stressful of being engaged, that's for sure. I've never been engaged before.
Or since.
Or since. So it was quite a interesting thing to do because I didn't know kind of how to do it or what the procedure was, but just kind of played it by ear, what I thought may be a good way to do it. So
Now,
I want to make sure her parents were okay with it. Main thing.
Now, I want to take more time on this other topic, and so we'll probably save it for another time, and that is your trip to Germany. But up to that time, you decided to get married. You got married on the 6th of October. You then were off to the military when? In November?
I was drafted not many days after we were married, wasn't
Yeah,
I?
he left 3 weeks later.
3 weeks later I was drafted and headed out to Fort Carson, Colorado.
So you were married for 3 weeks. Where did you live those 3 weeks?
In Orderville in a motel.
And
we did some things in the farm and went and planted some grain and did some things around the farm before I took off for Fort Carson, Colorado.
It's the first time I'd ever planted wheat by scattering it, throwing it out with my hands, but that was for the baby lambs. When they started lambing, they would put them on these little patches with the new wheat growing up and let them eat that.
Were you doing these things to just make sure things were taken care of when you left?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
'Cause who took over farming when you were gone?
Brother Cleve.
You know, who was it?
Cleve.
Was he the one around there or what? And this Mexican was there too, wasn't he?
Yeah, the fellow you
We had
worked
a
with all those
Spanish
years.
guy was there too.
you, so you were together for 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Where did you honeymoon, or?
We went to
He went through this country.
yeah, right through this country, right through here, right through Idaho and up toward Oregon
Mount
and
Hood.
south to Mount Hood and then down to the road that comes back through Salt Flats, back over to Utah, and then back to southern Utah.
So you're married for 3 weeks, then you're off to Fort Carson, Colorado for military training, and you're gone for what, another
2 months.
2 months,
Mhm.
so 8 weeks, and then you get to see each other when? Around Christmas time, or?
Yeah, he was off for a month at Christmas time and he came home. And then we went together back to Colorado for another 2 months while he had his second 8 weeks. And then his mother flew out and she and I drove back to Utah, and Roe was in Germany then.
And when did you learn that you were pregnant with Anita?
During the Christmas break. We could have called her a honeymoon baby.
I think that's a pretty accurate statement.
Yeah.
So you found out you were pregnant, and then Dad's off to Germany.
Mm-hmm.
You're off to Centerville.
And southern Utah.
Homeless.
I got around a lot.
So next time when we get together, let's pick up on that in Germany. Now, Mom, I know you had a story you wanted to share, and I wanted to make certain we captured that before we forgot. Was there a story you wanted to share about your dad?
I did, and this one,
Mom,
I'm
do you
going to
wanna
look at
let
my notes just
Dad
a
go
second.
get dressed while you share it?
I'll be happy to do that. You want to go get ready for church?
Yeah,
And
I
you
guess
won't
I
feel
should.
too rushed?
Yeah. She
Well,
had
I can wait for it. I want to hear this
Oh,
story
okay.
myself.
I don't want you to
He
feel
may need to
rushed.
correct it. So
Oh, okay.
Well, when my dad didn't have any formal religious training, but he had a lot of ethics taught to him, as well as my mom. My mom was baptized into a church when she was an infant, and they went when they could. But her dad was a little more liberal than most church people. He believed in dancing and having some fun and playing card games, and those were pretty much taboo in most of the formal churches in her area. So they lived a looser life than maybe most of the formal churches would have prepared for him and presented to him. But at any rate, Dad had a high standard of behavior that he expected of himself. And they went to a party together, and a man came through that they both knew, and he was unzipping his clothes in mixed company, saying, "Where in the world's the outhouse? I can't find the outhouse." And he had been drinking. And my father was so totally embarrassed, just thoroughly embarrassed. And he said, "I will never put myself in a position where I don't know what I'm doing." Because he said, "I know that guy doesn't know what he's doing." And so he never touched alcohol. And then finally this another gentleman in the neighborhood was in his late 40s, and he got married. And my dad said, "Wow, if old Billy Hunt can get married, I guess I can smoke the cigar he's passing out to all of us." So he lit up the cigar and took a big breath in and turned green and started throwing up, and he never touched smoking again either. But it paid off. When he was about 49, 50, close to 50 years old, a light bulb burned out in the top of a barn on the fairgrounds in Salt Lake. And of course they were showing horses, and they needed the light in that barn. So Dad put a light bulb in his pocket, a new one, climbed up the side of the wall of the barn, hand over hand on one of the support beams that went out to the center of the barn, held himself up by one hand, unscrewed the light bulb, put it in his pocket, took the new light bulb, screwed it into the thing, and went back. And one of the men standing on the ground looked up way up there and said, "Vic, you're a crazy man doing that. You got to be at least 35. What are you doing hanging up there by one arm?" And he was closer to 50. And when he was 50, on his birthday in December, there was little snow that year, he walked on his hands completely across the front of the house, the length of the house, across the front of the yard. He was very pleased that he had kept his body in such good condition. And I just thought, if you have some goals in your mind when you're young, you can keep yourself safe. And the Lord will guide you regardless, because you're one of his children. So I wanted to tell this story because I know there's a lot of pressure on people to destroy this beautiful body that God gives us, but he only gives us one, and we got to take care of it. And also, Dad got hooked one time. When I was 14, he came to me one day and said, "Linda, do you drink alcohol?" I said, "No, Dad, my church teaches me to leave it alone." He said, "I think that's a good idea." He said, "Look at my hands," and his hands were shaking. And he said, "Every day at 4:30, I always had a cup of tea." And he said, I didn't have one today. And look how shaking at 4:30 every day I get shaking. And he said at 10:30 I have trouble as well, and that's when I always had a Coke. He said, "I think there's something in our DNA," we didn't have that term then, but something inside of us that causes some of us to be able to become addicted to things easily. And he said, "I think that we ought not let ourselves repeat certain patterns over and over, because that becomes an addiction for us." And he said, I think you're wise not to start anything like that." So he was a good teacher of the word of wisdom, didn't know it.
wow. Good, Dad.
Our word of wisdom in our house was kind of interesting. When you was out with the sheep, out in the range or out away from home, the sheep herders always drank coffee and usually smoked cigarettes where you had to roll, those little cigarettes.
Mm-hmm.
And so that looked kind of fascinating, especially for that coffee early in the morning smelled pretty darn good.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew our mother had taught us some of the things you see some of the sheep herders do. I don't think it's a wise idea for you to get involved in it at all. especially those cigarettes that they roll, and it takes them 10 minutes to roll one. It takes them another 20 minutes to smoke it. So that little package of cigarette powder was in a little sack, and you'd roll it up and put it in a little cigarette and smoke it, and that became quite a time-consuming thing just to make the cigarette. So, but I knew I didn't want to disappoint Mother getting involved in coffee or a cigarette, so I never did. So that was a good thing to learn pretty young.
That's a great way to wrap up today. So next time we get together, we're going to talk about Germany. We're going to talk about being away from each other, and I also want to get some of your thoughts on each other's parents and your own children. So, thank you.
Thank you. You're a
Are,
good
are
interviewer,
you
Kevin.
are you guys going to church with us?
Yeah,
Oh.
we're ready.
Oh, you're ready. I'm the only one not ready.
You're the slow one today.
Ah.